This is why you should be extremely careful when someone offers to buy you a drink. I went to a punk show in LA with my brother and his best friend. The band I wanted to see wasn't playing yet, so I hit the bar to go grab a drink. That's when this really cute guy approached me and started talking to me. We got to talking and we were vibing for a while. After about 30 minutes, he asked if I wanted to get a beer and I said sure. I watched him buy it and open it right in front of me. He said he was getting hot and asked if I wanted to go outside and get some air with him. I politely said no because I didn't know if they would let us back in, but he kept insisting. At this point, I had drank half my beer and I was ready to go meet back up with my brother. I let him know and I got up, but that's when I started feeling really weird. As I was looking for my brother, I started to get really dizzy. That's when I felt someone's hand on my shoulder. I clumsily whipped around to check and it was the guy from the bar. That's when he said, "I told you we need to get some air. Let's go to my car." At this point, my body felt so weak, I could barely stand. It was hard to think, let alone reply. That's when he put his arm under my shoulder and was carrying me towards the exit. As we were getting closer to the exit, a deep panic started to set in my stomach. I couldn't talk or walk, but I could still see and hear everything around me. Right before we reached the exit, something amazing happened. Part 2 of why you should be extremely careful when someone offers to buy you a drink. At this moment, I felt like the unluckiest, but also the luckiest person in the world. A group of girls noticed that I was barely able to walk and this guy was practically dragging me out towards the exit. One of them walked over and asked what was going on. The others followed. That's when he said that we were friends and that I drank too much and he was giving me a ride home. The girls looked over to me and asked me if he was my friend. At this point, I couldn't even respond. I couldn't even form words to tell them no. Again, he insisted that everything was fine and he's trying to take me home, but the girls were not having it. They said that since I wasn't responding, they wouldn't let him take me. That's when he tried to push past them, but they stopped him and told him if he does it again, they're going to have to fight him. Luckily, my brother and his best friend had been looking for me and they saw what was going on. The group of girls told my brother everything that was happening. My brother told the girls to watch me and him and his friend dragged the guy outside instead. My brother taught him a lesson that he'll never forget outside and then came back for me. Since we were 30 blocks from home and I couldn't walk, my brother and his friend put me in a shopping cart and took me home. We never got to see the band that we went there for, but I made it home safe and that's all that matters. Story time about how I caught my best friend with my ex-boyfriend just a few weeks after we broke up. We became friends in middle school and were inseparable ever since. My boyfriend and I met when we were 20 and we were together for 3 years. I'm not a strong drinker, so whenever we would go out, I would usually be the DD. My best friend used this opportunity to get extremely wasted every time we went out. Every time she got drunk, she would be extremely flirty with my boyfriend. She would do things like touch his chest, lean on him, and want to be in every picture or video he took. I chalked it up to her being drunk and didn't think too much into it. Fast forward to when me and my ex finally broke up. My best friend encouraged me to break up with him and told me that I deserved better. Shortly after, I noticed that she was hiding things from me and not telling me where she was or who she was hanging out with. Whenever we kicked it, she was always on her phone nonstop, and when I looked over, she would hide her phone or turn it over. One day I looked over and I noticed my ex's name as the contact that she was texting. I let it go that night, and the next day I checked her Snap location. Her location was in my ex's neighborhood, so I texted her and asked her what she was up to. She tried to play it off by saying she was shopping with her mom. At this point, all I saw was red. I decided to grab my keys and go over to my ex's house. Part 2 of catching my best friend with my ex-boyfriend a few weeks after we broke up. So my ex had a habit of not locking his doors, and when I went up to the door, guess what? It wasn't locked. I quietly let myself in and made my way up to his bedroom. I could already hear noises coming from the bedroom, so I knew what was up. Or so I thought I did. Imagine my surprise when I flung the door open and saw my best friend not with one, not with two, but 3 guys, and one of them being my ex. The look on her face when I walked in and saw her was priceless. I should also mention that I was recording all of this, so I got it all on video. My best friend ran after me with a blanket around her. At first, she was apologetic and begging for forgiveness. But after noticing that I was pretty much done with the friendship, she started being a huge bitch. She started calling me names and telling me it's not her fault that my ex likes her better because she's not vanilla like me. The next thing I did was really petty, but at the moment I didn't care. I texted the video I had of her to her sister and let her know what was going on. That's when she went into a full-on rage and tried to swing on me. I dodged it, yanked the towel, and slapped her right back. I left her on the lawn looking stupid and naked. All of our friends took my side and I never heard from her again. This is why skipping detention might be a good idea. When I was in high school, I slacked off a lot. My junior year, my math teacher was pretty upset by this. Once during a parent-teacher meeting, he told my mom that I wasn't doing as well as I could and called me lazy. My mom agreed and stated that she wouldn't blame him if he pushed and punished me to work harder. From this day on, he did exactly that, always questioning me before anyone else and always sat next to me during exercises. This is when my classmates started realizing that he was a little obsessed with me and started teasing me about it. Right before Christmas break, he threw us a surprise party with chocolates and mock champagne. He poured me an extra glass and congratulated me for doing better. I drank the first glass he gave me, but not the second because I'm diabetic and had already had too much chocolate. During the next class, I felt extremely sick and almost fainted. I spent the rest of the day in the nurse's office and chalked it up to eating too much candy. A few weeks later, I failed a math test. He became extremely angry and yelled at me in front of everyone. The look in his eyes chilled me and I cried. He gave me detention but scheduled it hours later than the usual time and said he would personally be there as well. When I showed up, it was getting dark already and I noticed I was the only student there. Something felt off and a feeling deep inside my gut was pushing me to skip. Right when I decided to skip, I look over and see him walking towards me. Part 2 of why skipping detention might be a good idea. As he walked towards me, I was getting nervous. I told him that I had an emergency and I had to go, but I would email the school and reschedule later. Right after this, I ran off. As I was running away, he yelled at me and told me that I had to obey him and come to detention or he'd call my parents. At this moment, I didn't care. The feeling in my gut kept growing, so I sprinted to the bus and went home. I was afraid that he'd call my parents, but my parents greeted me normally when I got home, so I assumed he didn't. The next day, I was expecting to get an earful, but he wasn't there, and as weeks passed, he never came back. Then a shrink came to our class and asked if he'd like to talk about our math teacher, but no one knew why. Fast forward a few years later when I became a teacher and started chatting with my coworker. I mentioned his name, speaking to her about my weird, bizarre teacher and how I skipped attention. That's when one of the oldest workers there went pale hearing his name. It turns out a few days after I skipped attention, my math teacher was arrested for downloading child you-know-what from the dark web. He also had tons of snuff videos doing terrible things to children and teens. Now I always wonder what would have happened if I hadn't followed my gut instincts and stayed for detention that day with just me and him in that classroom.